Right, so I'm here in this DEXA scanning department. It's the gold standard of body fat measuring. And we've got today, please introduce yourself.
My name is Archie.
Archie, and he will explain a little bit more about what you can expect in terms of DEXA scan and so on and so forth, because my other challenges like the 500,000 rep challenge, I know we had like the capillary test and the aim wasn't that accurate, so I thought this time around we'll do a DEXA scan. Archie, tell us a bit more about it.
So you said you did a caliper readings, Mark, and you figures you came up with between, you said you got down to about 7?
I think I started with 11.2 and I went down to 7.7.
Okay, yeah, so calipers tend to read a lot lower than DEXA scans. Generally we see some anecdotes maybe 3 to 5% lower on calipers than DEXA. The reason being is DEXA is the gold standard of measuring body composition. It will measure every gram of fat in the body. Now, you hold fat intramuscular, you even hold fat in your bone marrow, what's the internal fat, visceral fat. These kind of things clearly won't be picked up by a simple pinching of the skin. So that will just measure basic subcutaneous fat, so fat underneath the skin, and at best it will give an estimate of that. So the readings will be slightly higher than what most people would expect from a caliper, and they'll also be much more accurate and precise.
And how long does this whole procedure sort of take normally?
So the scan itself only takes 4 minutes once you're in position.
Oh really?
Yes, the arm of the machine will make 3 passes of the body,
right.
And it's 4 minutes and you're
okay.
all done.
Let's do it. Alright, done. Dressed again. So let's have a look at the results.
So this is just your analysis. What we do with DEXA is eliminate each arm, each leg, and then the trunk. So that's how we dissect the body. So the trunk is this main area here, and then you've got each arm and each leg. So I manually just adjust the points just to make sure your body's evenly split up. And then we can, one of the benefits is we can then check to see if you're carrying more muscle on one side or the other. So you can have a look at muscle imbalances, and that can potentially then adjust your training program if we see any highlighters. So you see the lean tissue, you can see the body fat. So we're looking through your visceral cavity. This point is eliminating, so what you'll see here is the subcutaneous fat underneath the skin. So we eliminate that by these lines, basically say don't read that, and then read through your visceral cavity and see how much internal fat you're carrying. That'll be another of the results on the report. Awesome. So I'll run through your report, okay, in order, go through all the numbers, and anything that's unclear or anything you'd like more information on, just let me know.
Sure.
Okay. So first thing you'll see is your DEXA image. So on the scan, orange is fat, red is lean, so we're looking at mainly muscle tissue there. We'll also include things like organs and connective tissue, and then blue is bone. Okay.
All right.
So then you can clearly see your distributions. In terms of the scan itself, then the body's broken down into different regions. So you have each arm, then your trunk, so that's this main upper body region here. Okay, so that will include muscles in the chest, back and through the core, and then we have each leg. Okay, so with DEXA we'll read down to your subtotal line. We ignore the head, we're not interested in the head in terms of body composition.
Sure.
Okay, so you're carrying 16 kilos of body fat, and there's figures on the report which will show whether that's high or low. Okay. Other areas that the body's broken down into on your DEXA scan are your android and gyno regions. So android is this small rectangle through the belly region. That's where we tend to see men having their highest storage of body fat. And gyno is this bigger rectangle at the top of the thighs, and that's where we tend to see females having their storage pattern. Okay, so those are the regions that the body's broken down into on the scan. DEXA will measure then your fat mass in grams in each area. We'll measure your lean, okay, so again focusing on muscle mass, and bone in each area, and those are separated on the next page, and then the two together. So if we look at your percentages in terms of body fat, you are carrying subtotal 16.6%. So you're carrying 16.6. As I said, we'll compare you to our male client base. So you've got 1,400 men scan on this table, and 16.6 will put you roughly here. So you've got 15 to 20% of our clients coming in with lower body fat percentage, and 80-85% coming in with higher body fat percentage numbers.
If I get down to 10, I'm probably in the 1%.
Yeah, so I mean 10 is the lowest we've ever seen. Interestingly, say you have a more female fat distribution pattern, So as I mentioned, Android is generally
Yes.
where men store their highest figure. You're carrying 18.2% in the belly. You're actually carrying your highest figure in your gyno region, which is here. Okay, so from a health perspective, that's good. For having visible abs, that's good. And that's where your highest storage is in terms of percentages. So those are your percentages. Next piece of information, your BMI, which, as you probably know, as an athlete, is pretty useless for you because it just measures your weight to your height. But obviously, with you having a lot more muscle mass, it's coming up as you being overweight, but you're clearly not over fat. Okay. We look at all the main fat numbers on your report on this box. Okay, so we've pointed out body fat percentage, total and subtotal. Now with DEXA, two numbers which we actually focus on more than body fat percentage is your fat mass index. That's measured by how much fat you're carrying for your height, and then your lean mass index, so how much lean you're carrying for your height. Now these are better figures in terms of representing the numbers than body fat percentage. To give you an idea why, we could have someone who was, say, stick thin come into the clinic, not carrying a lot of fat, but carrying almost no muscle, okay? And their body fat percentage could actually be quite high, because although they're not carrying a lot of fat, there's not much else to them. So as a percentage, body fat comes up high, but they're clearly not fat.
Sure.
And these two figures would then tell us, okay, they're not carrying a lot of fat, but they're also carrying no muscle.
Right.
Okay, so that's why we look at these two. So if we compare where you fall on our charts for your fat mass index, how much fat you're carrying for your height, 4.7 is actually closer here. Okay, so where on your body fat percentage you're around the 15th percentile.
Yeah.
Okay, fat for your height you're actually around the 30th percentile. So 30% of our clients are coming with lower levels of fat for their height. Okay, the reason why you do better in terms of the percentage is because when we look at your lean tissue, okay, so focusing on skeletal muscle, lean for your height 22.4 would fall here, so at our 90th percentile. So you're coming in with more muscle for your height than 90% of the people we see in the clinic. This sort of 19 to 99 percentile is generally bodybuilders, gym bunnies, that kind of thing. People do a lot of weight training.
So how much movement is then there possible really for me? Because I'm going to go through this workout which I created for 10 weeks.
Okay.
What would you then expect to happen? Would you expect to happen that this more or less stays the same rather than building muscle and losing the fat, or?
Yeah, so people underestimate how easy it is to drop lean tissue when they diet. To give you an idea, our average person we see in the clinic, when they go through a dieting phase, for every 2 kilos of fat they lose, they'll lose a kilo of muscle.
Right. Because
when you start to cut calories, your body will, obviously, it has to use fuel, it has to either use body fat or muscle mass. Now as we start to get leaner and leaner, obviously there's less body fat to use. Your body will eventually want to drop muscle tissue. Muscle tissue obviously burns a lot of calories at rest. So if you're cutting your calories down, your body's always going to want to stay in homeostasis. So it's going to want to stay level. And if your calories are down here, dropping the muscle is sort of bringing you level. So it's almost a fighting battle. You really have to give your body a strong stimulus to hold on to that muscle tissue.
Right.
Otherwise it will take some of the energy from muscle and some of it from body fat, and we obviously want the calorie deficit coming from body fat loss and not muscle mass loss.
Very good explanation, by the way.
So next 3 figures on the report are all ratios. So we're looking at body fat distribution here, not necessarily how much you're carrying, but where it is around the body. These figures for a man, we would like to see it 1 or below 1. Okay, so you can see all your ratios are very low, okay, which is what I mentioned before when we're looking at, I said you had a more female fat distribution. Yeah. So these figures are focusing on carrying your fat and whether you're carrying them in more dangerous areas. The first one is focusing on android belly fat and comparing it to fat that you carry on the top of the thighs. So with this ratio being lower than 1, it shows you're not carrying too much of your fat proportionally in your belly. Okay, and you can see that here, it's a lower percentage.
Yeah.
The next 2 then focus on the trunk, the overall upper body torso area, and comparing the fat in the trunk to the legs or your limbs, your arms and legs. Again, ratios nice and low, well below 1, shows that proportionally your fat is away from your trunk. Okay, obviously that's where all your internal organs are. So when we look at measuring visceral fat, so fats around the organs, we obviously want the fat away from there to then have the best chance of having a low level of visceral fat. So when we look at your visceral fat numbers, okay, visceral fat is linked to things like diabetes, heart disease, strokes. You are in a nice healthy range. So anything below 100 is normal. If you look at our average male client,
So
you're at
this
67.5, yeah. So that's visceral adipose tissue, VAT.
Okay.
And that's the fat directly surrounding the organs. So average male client's at 67.5. So you can see at 56, you would fall him. So only a third of our clients come in with lower visceral fat numbers. So you're below average, and below 100 is in the normal range. Certainly okay there in terms of health. Okay, so that's all the main figures on the first page. The next page is where we're then going to look at more in terms of distributions and see any imbalances or any strong points or weak points in terms of your numbers. Body's broken down into the same regions as the first page. Your bone, fat and lean mass are measured separately. Okay, so as I mentioned when I was doing the analysis, you can use this information to look at imbalances from the left to the right of the body. So you see you're carrying a little bit more muscle in the right arm than the left. You're also carrying more muscle in your right leg than your left. Okay, so you can see we're about just over 100 grams difference in arms, so not much at all, a couple percent. In terms of the legs, we're just over 500 grams, so actually just over half a kilo. So that's a fair imbalance. So that's in terms of distribution from left to right. We then also look at the distribution top to bottom of the body. We look, you're carrying just over 5.2 kilos on average in the arms. So we plot them on our charts in terms of kilos. 5.2 would be down here, 38.4 in your trunk, again would fall nice and low down on the charts. On average, we're about 14.4, just over in the legs. So again, very low down in terms of our figures because you're carrying a lot of muscle and you're also tall. So when we look at kilo figures, you're going to do well off. Potentially the closest you've come to the 99th percentile is in the lower half actually. So it suggests that your legs are your most muscular area in the body, ever so slightly. Fairly balanced, but the trunk and the arms are falling a little bit behind the lower half. I don't know if that's what you would expect.
Because when I was younger, I was cycling a lot.
Okay.
So that's how my legs were built in a way.
Sure.
But I also know that, for example, when I did my first challenge, I lost a lot of weight on my back and hips.
Yeah.
So that area, which we can see here.
Sure.
Right? That goes down. My butt basically is half the size afterwards.
Sure.
And here it's also so I'm expecting that to happen as well.
In terms of then another way of looking at body fat distribution, so we looked at the ratios and the absolute percentages. In terms of looking at the figures in grams, on average, just over 0.9 kilos in each arm would plot you there. 7.3 kilos in your trunk would put you in a similar position on our charts. 3.4 kilos in the legs would go lower down. So that matches what I was mentioning earlier, that we're, in terms of absolute body fat figures in kilos, we're seeing that you fall further down our charts in terms of the legs, which would suggest that you're carrying more body fat in the legs, and we can see that in terms of the percentages being slightly higher in the lower half.
Sure.
Okay, move on to the final page of the report, and here we look at your bone density scores. So DEXA scans are what's clinically used for bone density, but when we're doing a body composition scan, we're placing what radiation would be on a small area of the body to measure very accurately over the full body. So it can't be a diagnosable result, but it's a good indicator of where you're at. And we look at a percentage based on your age. So for your age, you're 4% above average than what we'd expect in terms of your bone density scores. Okay, which is good. We generally see that for people who do a lot of activities. The best way which we see bone density scores increase is through resistance training. So if you're doing a lot of resistance training, we'd expect you to have above average bone density.
And what is sort of the highest you ever had?
So I can proudly say the highest we've ever had was from myself.
Oh really?
Well, or that I've seen personally since I've been here at Bodyscan, and that percentage got up to 132, so 32% above average.
What have you been doing? We need the secret to
probably genetics. I mean, I was always heavy. Although your bones don't weigh a lot, so for your bone scores, if we look at your bone mineral content through the whole skeleton, we're at 3.2 kilos. So anyone who says they've got heavy bones, you're lying. Heaviest skeletons we see in the clinic are about 4 kilos.
So the actual, all my bones in total weigh 3 kilos.
3.2 kilos.
3.2 kilos. Wow, that's interesting. So excluding the
No,
head.
Including
head as well.
Including, yeah.
So the skull.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So the heaviest was 4 kilos.
Yeah. No one is heavy boned. But as you can see on the graph, this is the average line. You're 4% above average bone density. Any questions? That's the 3 pages of your report. If we go over a quick summary,
Yes.
Bone density scores are 4% above average, which is what we expect for strength athletes. We look at then your lean mass overall, you're at the 90th percentile when we look at lean mass index at 22.24. To give you an idea, the threshold for natural athletes is at 25. So when we see a figure come up above 25, we can assume that they're not a natural athlete. You fall within that range, but on the on the high end. So this is your lean mass, so how much lean you're carrying for your height.
Was it this one here?
Yeah, absolutely.
And if that one is above 25, okay,
then you can assume they're not a natural athlete.
Okay, interesting.
Based on research.
Good to know.
Okay. In terms of distribution, you carry a bit more muscle on the right side of the body than the left, especially in the lower half. And the legs are coming up slightly higher in terms of muscle mass, but they're also coming up slightly higher in terms of body fat. Okay. We can see that in terms of the kilo figures on the percentile charts, and we can also see that when we look at the body fat percentage numbers, that they're highest in the lower half, lowest in the upper half. Other figures, when we look at your visceral fat specifically from a health perspective, it's nice and low, which is good. Your body fat for these ranges in terms of ratios are clearly below 1, which shows proportion of your fats away from your upper body, away from your trunk, away from your belly. If we look at fat for your height at 4.7, you're coming in with lower figures than 70% of our clients. So you fall at the 30th percentile. 30% of our clients come in with lower amounts of body fat for their height than you, and that equates to a total body fat percentage of 16.6. Okay, so carrying a lot of muscle mass, carrying more muscle than 90% of our clients, and carrying fairly low levels of body fat, that could obviously be lower.
Right, yeah, awesome.
Any questions on the figures?
Thank you for explaining.
No problem.
Thank you for being very helpful here, because a lot of people have questions, and I think having explained the DEXA scan in that detail will clarify a lot of questions people have, and they ask me all the time and say, so what is this, what does lean mass mean, and so on and so forth. So yeah,
it kind of puts the real figures into perspective. So to give you an idea, we've scanned now over 1,500 men. As I said, we've had some pretty big names in the clinic, Jamie Alderton, Ryan Terry, Roger Snipes, Jacko de Bruyne, so well off people in the fitness industry, and no one has scored below 10%. So you'll see online all the time that this guy's 8%, this guy's 6%. When we look at accurate DEXA figures, as I explained, because we're measuring every gram of fat in the body, tends to come up higher readings than other less accurate measures. Those guys that are saying that they're 6 or 8% clearly aren't.
So just one question, when someone comes in and let's say they have 10% body fat, when they would use a capillary test, or they would just do the subcutaneous fat, what figure would they result in?
I'd say 5 to 6. I mean, myself, when I've got fairly lean and got down to about 12% on the DEXA, I've calipered at 7. So, and most people tend to have, I'd say on average, that 3 to 5% difference. So when we've had people come in and say that they've calipered at 10, they tend to be closer to 15. So that tends to be the difference.
And just in one sentence, why is that? Why is the difference that big between these two?
A couple of things. So obviously DEXA will measure every gram of fat in the body, internal fat, so you hold fat viscerally, so around the organs you hold fat, even intramuscular. Even in your bone marrow there is some body fat there. So there's body fat around the whole body, which obviously from a caliper, a skin pinch test, it's clearly not going to measure. It's only going to measure the subcutaneous fat. And as I've said, when we've got people in the clinic who have been very, very ripped and come up very low on their DEXAs, when we do that analysis and we look at the subcutaneous fat, you can almost not even see it on there. So that's why. And also there is that level of variation with calipers as well, depending on where you pinch, how hard you pinch, where your sights are, that some people can fall actually lower on there, and there's that range of inaccuracy.
Okay, awesome.
So, typed in your figures from your scan today, Mark. Okay, so this is on our website. Anyone who comes in for a scan, if they book a consultation, we'll go through this with them. So it's just your basic figures, so how much you weighed, how much muscle, lean mass, bone mass, fat mass you were carrying. Okay. From this, we have a look at 2 estimates. So the top estimate, these are both using a formula, so clearly there's a level of variation and inaccuracy in that. It's the best we can give you. So the top figure is based on just a generic formula, so if you typed in your weight, your age, your height, it would come up with this number. Now this is a much more accurate one. So this is using your DEXA data, the bottom figure, Catch-Mercado, and it's looking at how much lean mass, fat mass you're carrying. And based on that, it then gives you an estimate of your resting calorie requirements. So that's absolute no movement, no activity. 2,190. Okay. Then based on activity levels, your calorie expenditure will increase, and this is for maintenance, so this would be to keep your weight stable. These are based on the generic resting formula. Okay, so you can see you're 160 calories higher on the more accurate formula. So you would just add 160 to these figures, and that would give you our best estimate on how many calories you burn based on activity. So as I said, it's in a formula, but then it is using accurate figures in terms of exactly how much muscle and fat you're carrying. So it's a lot more accurate than most formulas which you punch in just your weight and other figures. I don't know where exactly you would fall in terms of activity level, whether you're
well, I'm using a calorie calculator as well. I'm using the Catch McArdle and the Mifflin Sanctuara, so I'm quite familiar with these formulas.
Yeah.
I would just like opinion on it in terms of when would people use the Catch McArdle if they have exactly these results. You know, you need your body fat percentage for that.
Sure, of course, yeah.
So what happens then if, you know, someone does the pinching test and says I'm 7% body fat and puts that in and actually is 11, then these figures will be not accurate.
As I said, it will be more inaccurate because they're going to come up with low levels of body fat, high levels of muscle. So naturally then it's going to estimate your calorie burn slightly higher because obviously a pound of muscle is going to burn a lot more calories than a pound of fat.
So if you don't know that figure accurately, you will probably overeat on calories if it's too low.
Yeah, sure. So that's just having a look at our expenditure. In terms of then, we can set you some specific targets. So these will measure your total figure. So this includes the head. So the 17 figure is actually 16.6. But we can look at setting you a specific target. I don't know if you had anything in mind in terms of a body fat percentage or...
Well, in these 10 weeks, I mean, I wasn't sure what I'm going to come up with.
Sure. But we can also look at doing is the sliding bar will adjust body fat and lean mass in kilos. So we move in half kilo increments. So say you wanted to drop 5 kilos of fat, maintain your muscle, we can show you what specific happens. Are you looking to drop a kilo a week?
Yeah.
Okay. If we put in that you came back 10 kilos lighter with 8 kilos less body fat and 2 kilos less muscle. Okay, so as I said, our average client is a 2-to-1 ratio in terms of body fat to muscle dropping. So we can see that's a 4-to-1 ratio. So you've done better in terms of retaining your muscle than most of our clients. That figure, if you managed to achieve that, would get you to a total body fat percentage of 10.1, which on our readable figure in terms of your subtotal is likely to be 9.5. So if you do come back with that, you'll be our leanest ever Bodyscan client. I'll shake your hand and I'll say you've done very well.
We'll see about that.
But yeah, if you manage to achieve those figures, you'd be doing pretty well. I mean, your fat mass index, when we measure how much fat you're carrying for your height, at 2.5. I think that would be the lowest we've ever seen. Again, the first percentile on our charts is at 3. So.
And the lean mass index was the one when it's above 25, you're clearly not natural.
Yeah.
And what would you be then? That would be a 22.
You'd be 21.9.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome.
So I mean, we do see people in the clinic who are over 25 and clearly natural, but it's because they have a lot of muscle, but they have a lot of body fat. So that figure can only really be read seriously when we see clients fairly lean, around the 15% mark. Then we can sort of gauge, because when you're carrying huge amounts of body fat, we can see clients carrying huge amounts of muscle mass.
All right.
So the target's set.
We'll see about that.
Leanest ever Bodyscan client.
Yeah, we'll see. That's a hard target. Good. So when you now click on go to body fat calculator, what does that do? It goes to the next page.
That's the next page, the final page, and then you can set specific targets. So as I said again, it's your total body fat. So if you wanted to get to 10.5, you need to lose 7.3 kilos. So this always assumes that you will not lose any lean tissue. So it's just looking at body fat loss.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you for running through that. I'm gonna include that website as well, so you guys can check that out. And just in general, if someone wants to use your services, how would they find you?
So Bodyscan UK is our website. So I mean, we are pretty much top of the Google list. Most people who come into our clinic find us through Google. DEXA scan. We're based in Marylebone, so London. Bodyscan UK. You can book the scan online. We have single scans, packages.
Alright, I'll put a link in the description below so you guys can check it out. Yeah, let's move on.